How did I manage to leave a job I hated with a salary of 1,600 euros a month to do my dream job and earn 3,500 euros net per month? In this video mini-series, I want to tell you my story and how I managed to make this transformation, sharing my entire journey with you. Don't worry, I don't want to sell you any course. All I want is simply your like and your subscription to my channel. I've always been a cook in my life. I went to culinary school and I had my first experiences in restaurants. I did a few seasons. I worked for 3 years in tourist resorts. Then I came back home after meeting my wife actually in the tourist resorts. I was working in a restaurant, but she got pregnant with my first daughter. It was 2007. That's why I decided to go work in cafeterias. At the time, I was working in the province of Varese area around Varese. I started working in this cafeteria as a cook, 40 hours a week, 1,500 euros a month. I used to walk 3,000 steps a day. It was a school cafeteria and I really busted my butt because I didn't have a second to breathe. After a few months though, I got an offer from my boss, Fabio. We're opening a new municipality near Milan. They got a new contract still in school cafeterias and my boss Aria offered me the position of director for this new contract. From cook to director, you might think, wow, I'm going to be the manager, I'll make money, I'll be paid well. No, because what I managed to get was a 150 euro raise. So I went from 1,500 euros a month to 1,650 euros a month. At that time though, since the money wasn't enough, I also worked on Saturdays at another cafeteria, still for the same company, at a hospital. And so I managed to scrape together a little more thanks to this extra job I was doing. And anyway, making it to the end of the month wasn't that easy. And it was really frustrating. Why? Because I felt I was worth much more than that. I felt I had enormous potential. Because anyway, guys, we're talking about when I was 26 years old, 26 or 27. In 2007, I was 26 years old and I was managing 5 kitchens and 40 people. The customer ordered everything that was around, which was definitely not a small amount, for 1,650 euros. At a certain point, things change. Because basically from managing 6 separate kitchens, a central cooking center was built. So a single kitchen from which meals are then sent out to the various schools, so the meals are transported. The organization changes a little bit. A chef is hired specifically to manage this central kitchen, but unfortunately soon after it becomes clear that this chef wasn't able to do it. And so my boss makes me a wonderful offer. Fabio, do you want to be the chef? Director, I'll assign you a dietitian to help and give you an extra 100 or 150 euros. Like a fool, I say, okay, wow, he's giving me a raise, I'll earn more. Okay, I'm in. Too bad, guys. That's where my hell began, because I didn't just have the responsibility and management on me, I also had to cook. And guys, I can guarantee you that it's really tough. Starting at 6 in the morning, leaving home at 5. Because on top of that, I also had 50 kilometers to travel. So 50 kilometers there, 50 kilometers back. Just to put the cherry on top, 1,200 steps. A day kitchen plus office, plus responsibilities, plus problems to solve, more. What else? A nice double job, because I've always done 2 jobs, but damn, still, I couldn't make it to the end of the month. Until in 2012, a couple of friends introduced us to a network marketing opportunity. Being in a situation where we didn't have enough money, we said, okay, let's do this thing. My wife would take care of it because, in fact, she was the one who was trying to create another source of income. And so, thanks to network marketing, let's say I started to get a little bit into the world of personal growth, business and marketing. Because I also started reading some books. And the first book I read, which really opened my mind because it made me understand A lesson that was fundamental was from the book by Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. You've probably already heard about it, but this book taught me a concept that is fundamental to getting out of the work cage and being able to earn more. The concept that if you trade time for money, you're destined to stay poor. But if you learn to work differently, a bit like the rich do, and I'll explain it to you in this mini-series, then you'll be able to have more money. At that moment, this really struck me. It left me stunned because it was the first time I had ever heard about this. And I soon realized that this principle was true. In fact, if you trade your time for money, you have a limit. That's why even if you work really hard, maybe have 2 jobs, you still can't make it to the end of the month. Why? Why? If you trade your time for money, you still have a limit. Why? Because time is limited. So you can work a certain amount, but you can't go beyond a certain limit. Because there are 24 hours, 8 hours maybe you sleep, right? You can work 12 hours a day, you can work 7 days a week like I did, that's fine. How long can you do that? Honestly, I wasn't able to do it for too long because in fact, what happened to me during that time? I had a nervous breakdown. I broke down because between the stress from work, the frustration because I was unhappy, I was dissatisfied, I was completely down, and the physical decline because physically I just couldn't take it anymore. That's when I completely broke down. That was the price I had to pay. Why? Because I was trapped in the rat race. I mean, the rat race, as Robert Chiesa talks about. That's exactly what he explains in his video and his book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That is, you keep running, but in the end, you always stay in the same place. I understood this, and I started wanting to take advantage of this through network marketing. So what comes to my mind? What do they make me believe with network marketing at that moment? That I can become rich. So I get it into my head that I can become rich quickly. Obviously, at that time, during that period, I was desperate because in fact, I had a nervous breakdown. I was working 7 days a week. As I entered this world, they taught me some lessons. They made me realize that by working as an employee, I would never be able to get the life I wanted, but I had to change. Network marketing was the solution because there I could multiply my time, which, I repeat, were all lessons that weren't completely wrong, but that I'll explain better to you throughout these videos. Because these are lessons that I misunderstood, and over time, this contributed to me falling into debt. In fact, the second reason I couldn't make it to the end of the month was that I didn't know how to manage my money. But at that moment, I wasn't aware of it. Because logically, if I can't make it to the end of the month, I don't have enough money. So what's the solution? Earn more? Too bad that even when I was earning a bit more, I still couldn't make it to the end of the month. And at that time, I couldn't understand why. But I talk about this in another video, which you can also find here on the channel, how I went from 20,000 euros in debt to 10,000 euros in savings in 2 years by learning money management. But that's another story. I still invite you to go watch that video. It's very, very interesting. Then there are many other videos about money management, but here I want to talk to you about my transformation at the work level. So I start picking up all the books that talk about wealth. I take courses to become rich. I start getting into network marketing. I start getting involved. I really start to be focused on this thing. And to be fair, on one hand, I also have to thank network marketing because the very first video I ever made, which I used to post on Facebook back then, was thanks to network marketing. Hi,
I'm Fabio Marchioni from CreatorEdaBusiness.com. I'm making this video to tell you my story. This is the first video I'm posting on my blog and my YouTube channel, and I want to tell you a bit about who I am and how. Network marketing is changing my lifestyle.
Today I'm doing my dream job, which is being a content creator, thanks to those first videos I made for network marketing. So let's say it wasn't a completely negative experience, even if it ended the way it did, but we'll see more about that in the next episodes. But the most important lesson I learned during that time was that working more doesn't necessarily mean earning more. Or at least it's not the right way to solve the problem, not for good. Okay, why can working more in the short term be a solution? It can fill a gap, but you still have to be careful, you're still limited, you still have to adapt your life to your income. And that's where I learned a very important lesson, which is that working and earning is one thing, creating wealth is another. Again, because what's the point? Guys, what's the lesson I learned now, looking back at the message from the past? It's that if you work for money, you're destined to be poor or at least remain mediocre. But if you want to create wealth, what you need to do is not work for money, but create something that earns money. So moving from being the one who directly earns, works, does something to get money in return, to creating something of your own that generates wealth, that generates money. In this way, you manage to break free from trading your time for money. In this first episode, what I wanted to tell you about was in fact the cage of work, which I hated, how I felt, and the beginning of my journey, because in fact network marketing, let's say, planted a seed in my mind and also in my heart, I have to be honest, which would later sprout, but over time, because that was the beginning of a series of mistakes. False lessons attempts. Okay, because what I want to tell you right away is that changing your life is possible. Getting out of the work cage is possible, but it's not something that happens in an instant. The mistake I was making at that moment was thinking I could get rich quickly. Okay, this is a huge illusion that unfortunately many people sell you, even with business and trading ads, about this and that. Because today online we find a lot of things where they promise you easy money. Look guys, it doesn't exist. Changing your life in an instant is not possible. I used to believe this too. And in the next episode, in fact, I'll tell you about all the mistakes I made, why I made those mistakes, where they led me, and the consequences I had to pay for making those mistakes. These are mistakes that maybe others have made too, which are completely normal, of course. But, I want to tell you in the next episode in detail what was a part of my journey to finally get to do the job of my dreams. Now, if you see yourself in my story, if right now you're in this situation where you feel exploited, underpaid, where you feel you're worth more than what you're being paid, subscribe to the channel, follow this series, leave me a nice comment, because I want to tell you everything, step by step, what I did, what I went through, what I learned. That's it for this first episode. I'll see you soon for the second episode of this series.